Hey friends, Andrew here, hope you're well. So I've used the M2 Air literally every single day since launch as my primary laptop, and after spending a few months with the M2 Air, this laptop I think may be the everyday laptop for the vast majority of people. A few months on from launch, the M2 Air is still in hot demand, and so much so that some configurations still command a few weeks wait. So whether you're waiting for your new M2 Air to arrive or you're considering a brand new laptop, here is my long-term review, and in this video, I'll share my new findings and hopefully answer the question of whether or not this truly is the everyday laptop. If you watch my reviews, you'll know I like to start with the negatives. So let's go over the long-term flaws I discovered over the months. I've recently moved to a new dedicated office space, and so I've spent a lot of time building up my new desk setup. And here's where I ran into one of the surprising flaws with the M2 Air, which initially went over my head and I haven't really seen covered in most reviews. And that's the fact that the two USB-C ports here are on the same left-hand side. It sounds trivial, and for the most part it is, until the dock you use prioritizes the right-hand side or the accessory you plug in blocks the only other empty USB-C port, for example. From a design perspective, evenly splitting the USB-C ports to sit on both sides would have been far more practical for basically everybody, but yeah, I haven't really seen this called out much, so maybe it's just me that finds this a flaw. This isn't a deal breaker though. Moving on to the more controversial quote-unquote flaw, the notorious midnight color. You either love or you love to hate. To me, I still find it absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful color, an ethereal, refracting deep blue hue that changes by time of day and lighting conditions. But yes, it definitely still is a massive fingerprint magnet. Nothing's changed there over the last 3 months. Actually, it's gotten worse. So if I were to buy this again, I wouldn't change my color choice. Actually, I still love it. All I've done is pull back on the consistency of wiping it down. Where I wiped it down daily, I now wipe it down weekly. I've just sort of, accepted the smudges, and dare I say it, it feels like it gives it more character, like a good leather patina. People who can't stand a single smudge and are kicking up a big fuss about it, I don't know, it kind of gives me Patrick Bateman vibes. Hopefully you got that reference. If you're worried about fingerprints and it's detracting you from the midnight color, don't be, unless you're a criminal. I feel like most of you will get over it in a couple of weeks and come to enjoy the midnight color for what it is, sophisticated. Especially with this wallpaper, which brings together the midnight color pretty well if you ask me. Link to it below as usual. It's been awesome seeing you guys rock the wallpaper in your setup. What I would actually change in retrospect is upgrading the SSD and memory. As savvy subscribers pointed out in my previous review, the slower read-write SSD speeds are specific only to the 256GB drive. Though even then, performance throttling continues to happen due to heat dissipation issues. It was evident over the last few months. The laptop would stutter and it would be hot to the touch more frequently than ever. And for the rare few who plan to throw a heavy workload at the M2 Air, as unconventional as that would be, this is something I think you should be wary of. If you're an everyday consumer and you use this laptop as an everyday laptop as it's intended to be, you should take the throttling and heat issues with a grain of salt, because it'll likely not be an issue for you in the first place. You're not going to hit the throttling threshold, so you're in the clear. Breathe easy and don't take the other dire reviews saying the base M2 Air is the worst thing ever. It's definitely not, and I've been using it daily for months. It's also worth pointing out I updated the M2 Air to the macOS Ventura beta, and that made the throttling issues even worse. The initial beta was quite unstable, to be fair. The Notes app wasn't working, things would freeze, and Stage Manager still kind of sucks, especially on a 13-inch screen. It seems to exaggerate the M2 Air's throttling and heat issues with this beta. But as you can see here, I was randomly browsing websites and I had to take out my phone to film this. It was just stuttering all over the place. It was laggy. When I checked the temperature via CleanMyMacX, it was well over the operating temperature range. And speaking of CleanMyMacX, they're today's video sponsor, and so here's a bit more about the genuinely useful app I use on a daily basis. It's an app I've been immediately installing onto all my new Macs because it keeps my Mac squeaky clean, and secondly, it saves me time. Consider it a bit of a personal cleaning butler for your Mac. Through its Smart Scan feature here, it automatically cleans unused system junk and app files on my system, and that's pretty important because junk files, malware, unused apps, it all adds up over time and prevents your Mac from working at its peak. The other feature I've been using a lot over the last few weeks is the large and old files feature here. It automatically scouts out all big files that might be unnecessarily taking up precious hard drive space so you can clean out your file graveyard. There's a whole other host of features to take care of your system optimization, privacy management, and I find myself saying this a lot. Can we appreciate just how beautiful this app is? Definitely recommend CleanMyMacX as a must-have app to prevent your Mac from being cluttered in the first place or to delete years of junk if you have an older Mac. You can try out the app for free in the link below and test it out to see if it works for you too. Now, moving on to the positives with the M2 Air, and geez, have I loved using this laptop as a daily driver over the last few months. Here's why. I didn't cover the M2 Air keyboard in my first review in detail, but the more I type on it, the more I love it. It sounds great, it feels great, and it works great. What more can you ask for? The Magic Keyboard is lifted from the 14-inch MacBook Pro. It's identical on paper with the traditional scissor switch mechanism, but there's something more tactile and responsive to the typing experience on the MacBook Air M2. It could be the M2 processor or it could be placebo. I can't put my finger on it, but if you have the M2 Air, let me know down below if you feel the same. But either way, the keyboard has been amazing, and I found myself taking it to the cafes all the time. Which leads me to its portability, weight, and design, a big positive over the last few months. I've had others pick up the laptop and their initial reaction is almost always, wow, this is so much lighter than my insert just about any laptop here. I've missed owning an Air for this exact reason. It's just so easy to roam around with, to go traveling, to go work remotely with. I'd go as far as to say, if you're a student, you don't need to look any further than this laptop here. The power-packed portability is all you need to excel with your studies. For me, it's now really hard to want to even pick up and take the MacBook Pro around. It feels gigantic after using the M2 Air every day in and out. In fact, I just have the Pro docked at home at all times now for the more power-intensive work, and I take my M2 Air over to the new office instead. And so this begs the question, how far can you really push your M2 Air? Well, here's a couple real-world examples. I edited a couple of small video files with ease, even 4K content, but when it comes to large 10-bit 4224 4K files and multiple hard drives, like the Setup Makeover series I'm working on at the moment, it just wasn't able to keep up to the rendering and file processing. With daily use, it only slows down when I actively use Figma, Spotify, Notion, Slack, and a number of PDFs and tabs up on Safari and Chrome simultaneously. That's when I start to see the M2 processor push, and depending on how many tabs I continue opening, performance was throttled. I want to stress that this isn't going to be an issue for most people. For everything else, especially if you're editing documents in the cloud, it doesn't skip a beat as long as you have a reliable and fast internet connection. The laptop doesn't need to be more powerful than it already is, given the intended market segment it's appealing to, the perfect everyday laptop for the everyday user. With the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips potentially just around the corner, even well into the development and testing phase, is the M2 Air still worth buying? I'll make it easy after using it for months. Yes, it is for probably 80% of the general population or more. If you're either not required to be using intensive apps or as a hobby, the M2 MacBook Air is where it's at. This includes students, small business owners, and the everyday mom and dad, for example. I think the M1 Air still represents the best value if you're strapped on cash, but if you're someone with deeper pockets and you're looking for a new daily laptop, I can almost guarantee you won't be disappointed with the M2 Air. And even if you're a so-called pro user, and yes guys, I totally realize that pro is a very vague term, this could still be an amazing purchase for those pro users as a secondary laptop to assist with your main workhorse. For me, the M2 Air is one of the best Apple purchases I've made in a while. I've been using it more than my MacBook Pro, which is now reserved only for content creation work. I mean, heck, I run my Shopify business and get all my life admin work done on this MacBook Air alone. And let's not forget, this is the base M2 Air. If you're looking for the best of the best, possibly even an upcoming OLED screen, well, I'll see you in the review of the M2 Pro when it drops. Everything else continues to stand from my initial review. The screen is amazing, even though it lacks promotion. The SSD read-write speeds is backwards for the 256GB version, yes, but it's fine for the intended buyer demographic. The upgraded webcam is welcome, and the notch isn't nearly as bad as you may think. It is the everyday laptop to get. If you made it to the end of the video, drop the code word comment every day and I'll give it a like. And while you're here, I'll drop a video right here where I go over the 14 must change settings when you get that MacBook M2 Air or update to Mac OS Ventura in general. There's a lot of settings that you want to change, including privacy and general speed optimization settings. So go check out that video if you're interested. And as always, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.